Greetings and welcome to this special episode of the Social Newsroom. We are in very uncertain times. I'd say uncertain given what has been happening internationally. And unless you've been living in a cage, you know the biggest international story is a conflict between Israel and Gaza. And what prompted this was an attack in Israel on October 7th. That's 20 days ago. And in 20 days, we have about 6,500 Palestinians who have been recorded as having died given this recent escalation, and over 1,400 Israelis who have also died because of this escalation, and over 220 Israeli hostages held by the Hamas. Now, this situation, no less, has involved many people around the world talking about it. Nonetheless, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who has said that even in war, there are rules to be followed and everyone has to respect them. I'm honored and privileged to have with us the Israeli ambassador to Kenya, Lotem. Thank you so much for joining us, and shalom. Shalom. And we basically want to give context to this to our Kenyan audience, our online audience for the Social Newsroom, what is happening. I'll give you an opportunity to just start with telling us, comment on this current situation and where we are.
No, I'll begin with another comment before the situation, before describing the situation. And since I understand that the Palestinian ambassador was also gave you also an interview. So in a normal situation, I could have sat with him here and discuss. Yeah. Because I can tell you that in these very days, our intelligence organizations and theirs in the Palestinian Authority, in the West Bank, not in Gaza, we are not in Gaza, we are cooperating. You know, whom are we cooperating against? Against the Hamas. Right. Because the Hamas wants to take the Palestinian Authority out of the West Bank. So theoretically we could, and practically could have sat and discussed this. Yeah. But Palestinians have an awkward habit of missing opportunities. As Prime Minister Golda Meir once said, they don't miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Mm-hmm. So one thing that has to be clear, it's not us against the Palestinians. It's not us against the Palestinian Authority. It's Israel against the Hamas fundamentalist terrorist organization. So that's one thing that has to be very clear. And something else that, two other things that you mentioned that I would like to relate to. I hope, and I'm sure, that Kenyan audience, Kenyan citizens, every human is not interested in the context. There is no context, and you're not looking for context for shooting babies in the head from close range, from long range, premeditated murder. There's no context. There is a context for a conflict. There's no context for a murder. You don't go to court and you ask what's the matter. If it's premeditated murder, there's no context for burning people to ashes, to a level that they cannot be recognized. So I will not be talking about the context. Mm-hmm. I can talk about the context of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but I will not talk with you, and I hope no human will speak about the context to killing innocent civilians. And about the numbers, you know, BBC, CNN, the other big networks, after the incident with the hospital, became very careful when citing everything, and they had according to Palestinian Hamas, according to Ministry of Health, controlled by Hamas. Mm-hmm. So this additional sentence or a few words is very important, because we know how transparent and accurate Hamas is. So that's very important when we discuss it.
Right. So are you questioning then, given what has been reported world over about the numbers, that there could be inaccuracy in this?
For sure there is inaccuracy. And I'm asking you, do you know how many of these, since we target every airplane, every Israeli jet fighter that goes on air has an address. an address with a house, apartment, a bunker, an ammunition depot, either a military target or a civilian that is being used by the Hamas. So we are very careful and we target it very carefully. Do you know to tell me how many of these are Hamas people? Before, in previous operations in Gaza, and we had almost 18 of such operations. Mm-hmm. Since we left Gaza, and that's important to remember, Israel left Gaza, the whole strip, in 2005. Yes. We left the cities, the big cities and towns of Gaza in, you know when? 1994, the Cairo Agreement. So we are not there in Gaza. And previously they used to report how many Hamas people were killed. Okay. For whatever reasons, they don't do it, for obvious reasons, they don't do it these days.
But one death is one too many, whichever side of it, and it has happened on both sides.
One civilian death.
Yes. One civilian death is bad enough, and it's happened on both sides. From a humanitarian context, as you've said, you're not looking at the politics of it. There's no pros and cons in this. But from a humanitarian perspective, whatever the number is, has it been worth it from your side? And this is as you explain what exactly happened and led to this particular escalation.
It's not a matter of was it worth it. I mean, Israel did not initiate the attack on the 7th.
Right.
So bear in mind that when the Hamas initiated and carried out the attack, they knew exactly what would be the response, the retaliation of Israel. So Hamas, you should ask yourself, and everybody should ask himself two questions. One, why did they do it in spite of the fact that they knew what will follow? Mm-hmm. Second, and the answer is obvious. The other obvious question is, why do they hide among civilians? Why they have the bunkers and the headquarters under hospitals? Because that's the way they treat their own population. There's a population of 2.4 million Palestinians in Gaza. Money that came in, hundreds of millions of dollars from Qatar, was used to build tunnels, not to build houses and infrastructure in Gaza. So if you hide among civilians, and if civilians allow and cooperate, because at the end of the day, 2.4 million, there is some level of cooperation.
Yes.
I was just telling friends 2 weeks ago, or last week actually, I participated, I joined the Hungarian embassy and the marking of the 1956 revolt against the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. The chances of this revolt were as good as the revolt of Bar Kokhba, the Jews, 2,000 years ago against the Roman Empire. No chance. But they said enough. We don't want this rule. So 2.4 million people did not say it in the last 18 years.
Right.
How come? Why? So if they want to stop, as you say, and I agree, any civilian casualty, the way to do it is very, very straightforward. You get the murderers out, you take your ammunition out, you release hostages, and you change. And I'm sure that all the international community will come embracing the population, will assist them in development, reconstruction, everything, which they have offered, the international community has offered it in 2007,
yes,
when the Hamas took power.
Speaking of international community, there has been a statement from the United Nations, and I'm sure you've seen it, and the Secretary General came under fire for seemingly letting this go on, and the criticism has been that Israel seems to be above the law, international law, that is. Would you say in your defense that in terms of the rules of war and an engagement of war, you have been following the rules of war to be fair? Because they call on all sides to follow the rules in war.
That's a very easy question. I'll tell you why. Because yes, I can revert the question to you, to the others, and ask give me which law are we violating specifically? No slogans of violation of law. So what law are we violating? Which law? And what are the details and the reality that prove that we violated? These are two very simple questions. So anybody that claims that we violate a law, first, to begin with, has to tell me which law, and then what was the violation.
Okay.
And I can tell you that violation of the law of war, one is to hide among civilians. So that's a very clear one. So we have the law and we have the violation of it. There's the law of war tells you that you can, of course, obviously can target military targets, and you are allowed to target civilian targets which are used by the militants, which we do. The law of war does not prohibit you, and even the customary law, which is much stronger when it comes to international law, from hitting civilian targets. In all these kinds of wars against guerrilla, civilians were killed and injured. It compels you to minimize. And this is why we make phone calls. Have you heard any other army that makes phone calls to the civilians and tell them, evacuate, we are coming down on the building? Have you seen? Do you know any? I would like to know.
Right.
Have you seen any army that drops millions of leaflets and saying, we are going to bomb this building because there's a tunnel underneath? If you would have seen, if you saw yesterday evening the bombing, you see craters in the roads that were bombed. Why? Because the tunnels underneath.
Yes.
So we do the maximum. We call the population to move from the north to the southern part of the Gaza exactly for this, to protect them, because this is the stronghold, these are the headquarters of the Hamas. So they didn't do anything in the last 18 years to take the Hamas out from their life, so we are going to take the Hamas out of their life and out of our life.
So are you calling it collateral when you've already announced, and there is going to be civilians who've been killed and injured as you strike, even if you have announced? Are you calling it the collateral of war that is unavoidable and it's not your mistake from your end?
Again, this is according to any international or not international, according to the laws of war. You are allowed.
Yes.
Also, practically, you're allowed to do it as long as you try to minimize.
Yes,
this
minimize.
Is what it's not carpet bombing. You know, some other countries did carpet bombing. We don't do carpet bombing.
Right.
And from any point of view, it makes maybe more sense, but we don't do it because it doesn't make human sense to do it. So we target exactly the buildings or the ammunition depot that we need to take out. And if this ammunition depot is in the building, if the tunnel, exit or entrance is in the building, so we take the building out.
What do you say to those who level the blame that the fact that humanitarian support cannot reach those who are in the area of the attacks right now? And they say it's because of your operation that people are starving, children are starving, are not able to get medical help and support. Because that's also the argument that the UN says, in the name of following the rules of war, allow humanitarian support to get there.
So that when we allow, actually, in the last few days, trucks are going in with supplies of medications, water, and food.
Yes.
Not with
weapons or anything.
No, not with gasoline. Why not with gasoline? Because we don't want to supply the Hamas. And those who think that there are not, that's a picture, an aerial picture of a diesel depot, which is held by the Hamas.
Yes.
So we don't want to feed the Hamas.
Okay.
We don't mind, and we assist, we enable the feeding of the people in the southern part of the Gaza Strip.
Right.
And this is why we were talking with the international community, with Egypt, to allow trucks to come in. You're right, this is something that we have to do by law or for, and this is what we do.
So in your response to Antonio Guterres, you are following the rules of war.
Definitely. And if I quote my minister and our ambassador in New York, seemed like Guterres lives on another planet.
Why do you say that?
Because if someone tries to put this.
That's an image. Describe it, because it's kind of hard to make out of what it is.
This is a couple that was burned to ashes. Jews were burned to ashes in Nazi Germany 8 years ago. And it took the world too much time to wake up. Burned to ashes. 6 million people. 6 million. So when we said never again, and so many leaders, when they come to the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Jerusalem, they say never again.
Yes.
But never again is now.
Right.
So now people have to talk. And for me, these last 2 weeks give me another understanding of the genocide in Rwanda. Because I understand how easy it is for people to see, watch on TV, and then to switch to another channel to see something more, a nicer thing.
Yes.
And to forget about it. We don't forget about it. We live there.
And it's great that you brought this up when you say that time, 80 years ago, it took the world too long to respond. People now are saying it's taking the world too long to respond to this escalation right now. What would you want the world to do in response to this, to bring this to an end? What would your world?
Let's go back to the way the Second World War was ended. At the conference that when the three big leaders met, they had one message: unconditional surrender, right? Unconditional surrender. So if the international community, for the students in different places, if different peace activists are so eager to put an end to it, it's an unconditional surrender, as easy as it is. It's not that easy, of course, because we are talking with a Nazi Islamistic extremist organization.
Okay.
This is why Nazi Germany did not give up. Japan did not give up until boots on the ground, right? That was the only way to end it. So probably this is the only way to end this one, unless the international community decides talking. Now, let's remember that most of the talks of the biggest, the most important, the key leaders
yes.
in the international community, the key leaders came to show support in Israel, to Israel. They came literally visiting Israel, going to the south. And when they saw these images, they understood there's no context to it.
Gotcha.
This is why they said, we support, leaders of US, Britain, Germany, Italy, yes. Austria, say, we support the Palestinians' cause. But this is not the Palestinian cause. They said Hamas does not represent the Palestinians. This is what they said. And because they understand these are two different stories.
Okay.
They are two different geographically separated issues. The Gaza Strip in the south, more than 100 kilometers away from it, the West Bank, Palestinian Authority. We are not in Gaza, as I said, from 2005.
Right.
We're not there. So when Hamas talks about occupation, let me read you something that will give the gist of it.
Okay.
The Hamas Covenant, 1988, they say very simply, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, just as it obliterated others before it. So when they say occupation, Hamas is not occupation of Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
It's occupation of Haifa, of Nazareth, of the Galilee, of Jerusalem. Article 7, just to give you the colors.
Yes.
The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews. When the Jew will hide behind stones and trees, the stones and trees will say, oh, Muslims, oh, Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. Article 8, Allah is its target. The Prophet is its model. The Quran is its constitution. Jihad is its path, and death for the sake of Allah is the loftiest of its wishes. And the last one, about, because probably we will come to it, about peaceful solutions. What do they have to say? Article 13. Initiatives and so-called peaceful solutions and international conferences are in contradiction to the principles of the Islamic resistance movement. So this is, whom are we talking about? We're not talking about the Palestinian Authority. We've been talking with the Palestinian Authority, and I can dwell on it separately if you order details, but this is not the Palestinian Authority.
And I like that you bring that up, because you've said in reading that, I'd also like to read something to separate the issues. And you've said it's separated even with the map that you've shown us. It's not about the Palestinian nation. This is about Hamas, the terrorist outfit, as you describe it. And Palestinian state was recognized by 138 of 193 United Nations. At the Oslo Accord, Israel also recognized the right of the Palestine people to have their own state and recognized the PLO as a representative of the Palestine people. Just to clarify to the Kenyan audience who don't have this context, is this the case? Has anything changed since?
Well, in 1993, Oslo Accords recognized the PLO, it was another terrorist organization, a secular one, as the representative of the Palestinian people. And in return, he disengaged itself from terror, at least for a period, which was followed by the agreements of 1994, and then we left Gaza. And the PLO came into Gaza and into the West Bank. The other part, Judea and Samaria. The West Bank of Jordan River. So they came and took control of the whole of the Gaza Strip. We were left with some access points there.
2005.
No, in 1994.
Okay.
They took control of the cities, the Gaza city itself, the towns, the refugee camps, and all the cities, the big cities in Judea and Samaria. Nablus, Hebron, Ramallah, Jericho, Bethlehem, they took control. Now there are, in this territory of the West Bank, this is the whole map of Israel, in the territory of the West Bank, there are also 300,000 Israelis living in settlements. There are about 3 million Palestinians. And what we've been trying to do over the years, in the last 30 years, is to negotiate an agreement with the Palestinian Authority, a permanent solution.
Okay.
And you may recall that in 2000, in the summer of 2000, Prime Minister Barak met with Chairman Arafat in Camp David and offered him a good deal. Believe me, it's a good deal. 95% of the territory, 100% of the population under Palestinian control, to settle the issue with refugees, Jerusalem, all the major issues. The response of the Palestinian Authority was the Second Intifada, the uprising. So we go up and down, up and down. Eventually, I believe that conflicts are not without an end, so we'll come to a solution. And we have to come to a solution. It takes leadership on the other side. I mean, we showed leadership both with Rabin, Prime Minister Rabin in 1993, who was a general, who was the chief of staff in the Six-Day Wars. He could barely shake the hands of Arafat, who had Israeli blood on his hands, but he did it. Then with Prime Minister Barak in 2000, another chief of staff who went forward and offered 95%, and then Prime Minister Olmert, and then Prime Minister Sharon in 2005, another right-wing politician that withdrew us and uprooted the Israeli settlements from the whole of the Gaza Strip. So you mentioned the UN. Today there is a resolution that was forwarded to the General Assembly. I read it, And I thought how ignorant people can be, because Article 6 in this resolution says what they expect from Israel as a sovereign in Gaza. Now, Israel has never declared sovereignty in Gaza. Obviously, once we disconnected from Gaza in 2005, we said it's not ours. So Gaza, the same as the West Bank, are one of these very few territories on the globe that have no sovereign, no recognized sovereign. So, facts. The problem is people don't know the facts. They have an opinion. You know, it's very fashionable these days.
Yes.
People have an opinion about COVID, which was kind of, I don't know what, all these conspiracy theories. So I suggest that people start with facts, and, you know, I'm biased.
Understand. You're the ambassador.
You go to the documents. You don't believe me. You should not believe me. Take my word about 95% offer. Go and read the documents.
So with that, what you say, the deal that was given in 2000 about the 95% control, would you say that Israel then agrees or supports the right for Palestinian people to have self-determination?
Israel says that we have to go back to the table and negotiate, because we sat to the table in a few occasions.
Okay.
In 93, in 94, twice in 2000 and 2001.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you go and you enter into a shop to buy something, you don't put all your red lines or everything on the table and then start negotiating, right? So we say, let's come to the table, leave terror, and they are terrified. The Palestinian Authority is terrified from the Hamas. Ask the Palestinian ambassador if he dares going into Gaza. It will be a one-way ticket for him. It is a one-way ticket for all the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank. They don't go there. Abu Mazen has never entered Gaza after 2005.
Yes.
Because many of the Palestinian Authority leaders were dropped from floor 15 by the Hamas in 2007.
So you still support the right
a solution to a peaceful solution to the conflict.
All right. And you've mentioned something there about the Hamas, and it's very clear that you are going for the Hamas terrorist outfit. Do you see a solution out of this in empowering a separate, call it military force, that would, instead of just going on the ground to uproot Hamas from the Gaza Strip or West Bank, wherever it is, to empower another local force, PLO, for instance, and it doesn't have to be that. Is this a possible way out and sustainable way for the future?
You know, we do the job ourselves. We have bad experience with UN forces, for instance, in Lebanon. You know, Hezbollah, another Shiite extreme religious terrorist organization fed by Iran, supported by Iran, proxy of Iran, is in Lebanon. And there's a multilateral UN, there's a UN force in Lebanon, in southern part of Lebanon. We didn't see any good out of it. Our experience with UN forces in different places, when if they come when things are okay, then it's okay. But if they face a force, a terrorist organization, it doesn't do. And I don't see too many volunteers going to fight the Hamas in their tunnels, in any case.
Mr. Ambassador, if you may, for a layman person who's looking in from outside and looking at the options of going or bringing an end to this escalation. So there's a question of self-determination. There's a question of empowering the Palestinian people to be able to force out Hamas terrorist outfit, which you've said you'd rather do it alone. And to self-determination, you'd say we need to get back to the negotiation table. From a layman perspective, this might be a case of Israel wanting to have its cake and eat it. Would you please explain this to someone who has this perspective?
Again, one story One issue is the Israeli-Palestinian,
Yes.
with the Palestinian Authority.
Yes.
Well, we should sit, we will sit, we try, we occasionally, I mean, look, on a daily basis, Palestinians come to work in Israel.
Yes.
Big part of their export goes to Israel. Their export-import out of the Palestinian Authority comes through Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of interaction between us. Do the simplest, not the big theoretical or high politics. Go to Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. You will see how many of the staff are Palestinians. And believe me, I went with 15 diplomats from the UN that came to Israel to learn about the situation. And they had Palestinian cardiologists, X-ray experts, that were telling them, we come here because we don't have an X-ray machine in Jenin. So they addressed me, the diplomats, and asked me, why don't you tell the story? Tell me, we tell the stories, but you do like this.
Okay.
But now you see it. So the staff, go to Hadassah and see how many Palestinians are treated daily. And you know what? I spoke the day before yesterday. I have good friends in Hadassah. There are patients from Gaza today, now in Hadassah, who are being treated. Mostly oncology, they come to Hadassah. So we are there with the Palestinians. We will not disappear. The Palestinians will not disappear. So we have to sit and talk. This is one issue. A complete different one. The Hamas, the Palestinian Authority does not have this Hamas covenant. The signatory is the Hamas. Signatory is Hezbollah. Signatory is Iran. Do you sit to talk with Al-Qaeda? Why don't you sit to talk with Al-Shabaab to negotiate, with ISIS? Have you heard about anybody trying to negotiate with ISIS? Maybe they have a rationale. Maybe people should sit and listen and come to an understanding. Maybe they do deserve some part of Syria. If the population is willing to accept ISIS, why don't you want to sit and negotiate with them? Why is it that only when it comes to Israel, we have to sit and talk and put our hands up? There's this famous photo from the Second World War, a Jewish child in an extermination camp with his hands up. We are no more with hands up. No more. So go and speak. After we see the basic thing in the army is self. You have to go first and show example.
Yes.
So I want to see people go and speak with ISIS, negotiate with Al-Qaeda. In Africa, you have quite a few terrorist groups. Why don't you negotiate with them? Maybe we learn something. Then you come and train us. We train you in agriculture. You'll train us in negotiating with terrorists.
I think it's world over. It's agreeable. It's not easy to sit across the table. Unless, of course, you're armed and ready to protect yourself with the terrorist group. That is understood. But you did say earlier, to bring this to an end in the name of negotiations, there has to be unconditional surrender. Unconditional surrender by who?
By the Hamas.
Okay. So if they stopped, they left the Gaza Strip and said, we're out, you would stop. You're okay. Give Palestine the full right to...
You have to see the headlines to read them in Hebrew. Forget about the headlines in other networks.
Yes.
It says, the war against Hamas. It doesn't say the war against
Palestine.
Gaza. It doesn't say the war against Palestinians. These are the headlines in Israel. When you switch on TV, this is the war against Hamas.
Okay.
As simple as this. We should have the Islamic Jihad, but this is it.
Okay. You've mentioned headlines, and headlines create narratives and control perspective, public perspective and opinion about something. So the narrative has been that Palestinians want their own rule, self-determination, and this is what they're fighting for. But you're just saying to me right now that Hamas, the terrorist outfit, are the ones who are under some form of manipulation of the Palestinian people they want to control Palestine for their own good. Give us a context to understand what is being fought for. You've held a very good elaboration.
Yeah, so again, it's beyond me. My problem with understanding, not yours. How come we keep on talking about occupation?
Yes.
About self-rule, when we left Gaza 18 years ago, 2005. So why on earth are we still talking about self-rule? They have a self-rule. By the way, you know, if we touch on it, before 1967, Gaza was a part of Egypt, or was under Egypt control, part of Egypt, not because the British, when they sliced the world, they didn't slice Gaza. You know about it, one or two things. It was not a part of Egypt. The West Bank was under Jordanian rule. If all the Arab world is so supportive of the Palestinians, why on earth they didn't establish a state? They didn't let them establish their own state before 1967? Any idea? I don't have one. Or I have one, I will not share with you now. I prefer that the Arabs will answer this question.
Right.
Because they look down on the Palestinians. They hate Palestinians. You know why? Because Palestinians are very educated. They do very good businesses. They are, on a comparative basis, they do much better than many others. This is why they don't like them. Many of the Arabs look down on the Palestinians. Iranians look down on all Arabs. Just last week I read on IRNA, the official Iranian news agency, that they forbid Arabic to be studied in primary school, Arabic and English.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't have to take lectures from the Arab world about how to treat the Palestinians. I can go and give you specific references, who did what to the Palestinians, but I'll keep it to the next one.
There's something you've said in a previous interview, and you've quoted the attackers as saying, after Saturday comes Sunday. There's another narrative that's being created, because you've mentioned the Arabs, Iran and the Arabs, and it's becoming an Arab or Islam thing against the Jewish. Do you see this narrative being built?
No. It's a mistake to put it as a religious.
Yes.
It's a mistake because it doesn't reflect facts.
Right.
I like to stick to facts. You know, two of my previous postings, I was ambassador in Kazakhstan, a Muslim country, Sunnis. I was ambassador in Azerbaijan, a Shiite country. You know, you would say Iran are Shiites,
yes.
Azeris are Shiites. One of our closest allies and friends. Both of them, we get most of our oil from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. I mean, very close relations. So no, it's not a Muslim-Jewish thing. It's not. It's a fundamentalist Muslim terrorist organization.
Yes.
There's a big difference. And I'm sure that there are many Muslim leaders who would come and explain that this is not the way. Even the United Arab Emirates, the first comment they made after the 7th, this is not the way of Islam.
Okay.
So it drives me even crazy,
yes.
Sorry for the non-diplomatic, to say that it's a Muslim-Jewish issue.
Yes.
It's not.
Right.
Jews were living for centuries with Muslims very well.
And I bring it up because in the theater of war, there's also the fight over information and facts. And there's a lot of misinformation and aspects being thrown as fact that are misinforming the public. And that's why we're having this conversation. And I'd like for you to speak to the Kenya-Israeli relations, but as you explain to our audience who Israel is. We like to define ourselves as 80% Christian. Over 40 different tribes, 50 plus million.
We are only 12 tribes.
Only 12 tribes.
Oh, yeah.
So explain to us, we want to understand the people of Israel. in the context? Is it Jewish? Is it Christian? Just for a Kenyan who wants to understand who Israel is and their relation with other nations like Kenya and even the Arab world.
So Israel, we're 10 million people only in Israel. 20% of our population are Arabs, Arab Israelis. These days, most of them are Muslims.
Yes.
Previously, the Christian percentage was higher, but
yes.
many left. And these 10 million come from everywhere. Just in the 90s, we took in 1 million Jews from the CIS, from the former Soviet Union area. So they come from all over. They come from Ethiopia.
Yes.
They come from India, from China, from Europe, from the US, from different places. And what we chose, that's a very important thing to remember, that 1948, when Israel was established, when we declared independence, it followed the United Nations resolution of a partition of the territory to a Palestinian state and a Jewish state.
Yes.
So if someone wants to talk about a two-state solution, there was a two-state solution by the UN, which the Arabs, as I said, never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. The answer was attacking Israel by all the Arab world, including the Palestinians. Many tried to send us back to Europe from where we came following the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered.
Yes.
But what I wanted to say is that we look forward. The mentality of an Israeli is to look forward, is to take a challenge or a difficulty and turn it into an opportunity. So Gaza, Palestinians are complaining about a siege. There was never a siege. Now we put a blockade. So there was a maritime blockade, not to allow Iran bringing arms, but they have an exit to it. They always had an exit to Egypt, always. The same, as I said, 20,000 on October the 5th, 2 days before, not on Friday, because they don't come, but 20,000 Palestinians from Gaza came daily to Israel, and it was on the increase. So we look forward. We were surrounded until we signed peace agreement with Egypt, with Jordan.
Yeah.
We were surrounded by enemies. But we didn't say, okay, let's invest our resources in arms, in armament, in terrorist attacks.
Yeah.
We developed culture, literature, high-tech, agriculture, a society. So in 2007, when Hamas took over Gaza, the European Union told them, put this covenant aside, tear it, and we will assist you in turning Gaza into Singapore. But they don't want to turn Gaza into Singapore. They prefer 2.4 million Palestinians to live the way they live, and the Hamas to control them with the aim of, as they say, obliterate Israel. So we are sick and tired of shedding blood. The Israeli soldier is not his profession for life.
Yeah.
He's not an Al-Qaeda terrorist that moves from Afghanistan to the Northern Caucasus and then to Somalia and then to Westgate. An Israeli soldier is a student that goes to do his service and goes back to university, and high-tech person that goes to do the service and back to his high-tech startup. So this is who we are.
That's who you are. And we share very good relations, Kenya and Israel. In fact, our president was recently there, was hosted in Israel. And there is something in historical context, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I can see you've been ahead of me in time. But there is something called the Ugandan Project. And you were talking about earlier about this.
The Wasingishu project.
Yes, the Wasingishu project. Explain what that is, because this is said in history to have been an attempt to settle Israeli people there, just to help people understand how far back we go.
Yeah. So I have to bring it, even though I know that I'm walking a thin line, I will. The Palestinians keep on saying, especially in Africa, because it rings many bells, but the wrong bells, colonialism.
Yes.
You know, if we were colonialists, we would have come to Wasingishu, believe me. I hate hot and humid weather, like Tel Aviv in August.
Yes.
I prefer Wasingishu, Eldoret, perfect. So, but we said, no, this is not our land. Our land, and walk around with the Old Testament, and you will see that, because even the Arabs that were moving around, only a small number of Arabs were there throughout the centuries.
Yeah.
Very small, tens of thousands, the same as Jews, religious Jews. So you walk around with the Old Testament and you will see the places that were there. Yeah, we were thrown out from this land 2,000 years ago. Most of the Jews were wandering around, and they thought we will have a place to settle. But Jews were forbidden from settling anywhere in the world. You know that Jews entered the big cities of Europe only in the late part of the 19th century. They entered Berlin only at the end of the 19th century. Some of the cities only at the beginning of the 20th century. So we were not allowed to join the political elite, not to own land, obviously not to be in the army. Every place that could connect us stronger to a place. So at the beginning of the end of the 19th century, the Zionist movement developed. And only after we started coming back to our own promised land, which was ours, yes, we settled there. We occupied it. But you know when? 3,500 years ago, when we came out, when we went to settle in Jerusalem, when we settled in Palestine, and before the independence, Israel, Judea, the kingdom of Judea, the kingdom of Israel. This is when we settled. So we came back and we settled it. Now, when at the beginning of the 20th century, to answer your question, some part of the Zionist movement, not the Zionist movement, because the Zionist movement say go back to Zion.
Yes.
But one idea was to go to, it was called the Uganda Plan, because it was a part of the British, yeah?
Yes.
But it fell off the table quite quickly, because we're not colonialists.
Yes.
We don't believe in taking someone else's land. We came back to our own home.
Okay. Then as you've given the history of the struggle for the Israel people to have their own land and the fight, the Zionist movement, someone on the other side might say, you probably then understand the struggle that Hazem Shabbat tries to explain when he goes around doing interviews as well, that Palestine are really fighting for their own place, a place to call their own. Is that argument something that holds from your experiences, Israel?
You know, Israeli Jews, before 1948, before our independence, we tried in different ways, diplomatic ways.
Right.
We obtained from Britain a promise for a Jewish homeland, and then we also fought the British. The Palestinian national movement started only in the late 30s as a reaction, because they saw what's happening, and that was the reaction. When we accepted the partition resolution, the UN partition resolution, Resolution 181, was exactly the opposite to what the Palestinians did. We said, we will settle it diplomatically. Now, can you imagine You're asking me to imagine, so I'm asking you to imagine
Yes.
that Jews accepted the state without Jerusalem under their sovereignty, because the partition resolution placed Jerusalem under an international body, not an Israeli one. So we accepted a state with Tel Aviv as its capital. And Tel Aviv was in the beginning the capital.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how far we went. There are demonstrations, not these days, but 3 weeks ago, and through the decades in Israel, left-wing parties, left-wing NGOs, huge number of demonstrators demonstrating for negotiating a solution with the Palestinians, peace movements. Please, I beg, show me a Palestinian peace movement. Show me. Show me the division in the Palestinian parliament. Those who are against a peaceful solution, or the right-wing parties and the left-wing parties. Show me, not left when it comes to liberalism or socialism, economics.
Yes.
But show me about Israel. I want to see the demonstrators in the streets. I wanted to see the big demonstrations when Arafat decided to reject the 95%. None. So these are our partners for whatever it takes, if it's a conflict or if it's a peaceful process.
I want to give you an opportunity to close this out and speak to, I believe, I'll say 3 categories. You're here as the Israeli ambassador to Kenya. So your word to the Kenyan audience and the Kenyan populace looking at this conflict and saying, why don't they just stop it? And then your word, I'll also give you an opportunity to speak again to Hazem. As you say, it was easy for you to sit down and be at the same conversation earlier before this conflict. But as he says, you are terrorizing them, what your word is to him. And then the last one is to the United Nations and the global community, what your word is to them to bring this to an end, as the ambassador, Mikhail Lotem.
So, to the viewers, I believe in learning the facts. I thank all those Kenyans, and there are so many, that have been supporting us on social media, in messages, by coming, sending their representatives to us to support. And I see it as support for humanity.
Yes.
Not a support for only to Israel. As someone who says, I don't support this.
Yeah.
This is what he's saying. I don't stand with this. I don't think that there is a context to this. This is also what I say to the Palestinian ambassador. It amazes me and frightens me. Because if he is my partner for negotiations and he wants to put it in context, what should I make out of it? What should I understand when I go tomorrow to sit with him to negotiate? If this is what he wants to protect and explain, instead of negating and saying, no, Hamas, this is not us. We want a solution. And then let's talk. I mean, let's talk about a solution. So this is what I would tell him. And to the UN, this is what I say. I want these kids out. 220 people, 30 children. I just read earlier today the interview with the father of the Tanzanian student who is missing, not missing, probably in Gaza. And your heart goes out to him. And again, nobody was no Israeli soldier was hiding behind these kids. Hamas are hiding behind Palestinian kids. No Israeli soldier was in the house where they broke in, raped women, and then shot them in the head. So this is what I want to tell the United Nations. And it's not the United Nations community, because many countries in the United Nations support Israel. It's the very unfortunate statement of the Secretary General, which he tried to explain, but he just could have just said, I made a big mistake, that's all.
Right. Ambassador Mikhail Lotem, I really appreciate your time. My word to you, as will be to our audience, is Shalom.
Shalom, thank you very much.
And asante sana.
Asante.
And that's the Social Newsroom, our special edition.